Now, as you know, the Foyer Conference is all about the proclamation of the gospel in the continent of Europe. But it's been our practice for a number of years to deliberately invite some guests from other parts of the world so that we can hear from and learn from what God is doing in other parts of the world. So in recent years, we've had, for example, Samuel Escobar, an outstanding leader in Latin America. Ajit Fernando came and spoke here just 2 years ago from Sri Lanka. Many of us remember Rebecca Manley-Pippert coming from the States. These are all amongst the finest evangelical leaders around the world. And we're very grateful that this evening we have Rebecca and Ramez Atallah from Egypt. So we want to ask them some questions about their long ministry in Egypt and elsewhere. Rebecca has had a remarkable ministry for 42 years or so in the garbage village in Cairo. We want to ask her about that now, alongside other ministries. And Ramez has held senior leadership responsibilities in IFES. We met together in 1982 when I became European Secretary and he was Regional Secretary for the Middle East. And he's also served as Honorary President of IFES. He's also one of the few people who is involved in the Lausanne movement, which some of you attended, since the first congress in 1974, when he was the small kid helping John Stott to put the Lausanne Covenant together, working through the night. Still involved with the Lausanne movement, but has also served as General Secretary of the Bible Society in Egypt, which has had a remarkable ministry in Egypt and has influenced Bible societies across the Middle East and also other parts of the world. So together they've had a remarkable contribution to the advance of the gospel in different locations. So welcome, Rebecca and Ramez. You want to stand, Rebecca, as I ask you a couple of questions? Yeah.
Questions first.
Yeah. Well, you can use some of the PowerPoint about the work in the garbage village if you want. I don't know how long ago it was that you moved to Egypt, but it was certainly over 40 years ago. And you started the beginning of the ministry in the garbage village dates back to about 42 years ago. Can you please tell us a little bit about the ministry, what it is, how it came about, and the evangelistic and other fruitfulness that you've seen come from the ministry over the last 4 decades and more? Some people would not be aware of the background and the nature of the ministry, so if you could outline that.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. Yeah? So, the garbage villages in Cairo are lived in by people who collect our garbage. We don't have a government system. We have a private system. And people collect our garbage because they want our garbage. And they recycle it. And as a matter of fact, at present, they're some of the best recyclers of garbage in the whole world. But that's not how it all began. When it all began, it began in the 70s, in the 1970s. And the people were, at that time, basically without any hope. They lived in very primitive situations, and although they were Christian in name, because they raised pigs, and Muslims will have nothing to do with pigs and pork, they knew nothing about God's love for them. So let's see some pictures that will give you, first of all, this is the verse that I think very well illustrates what happened when God called people at the garbage village to himself. And I'm just going to let you read it. So this is a few things. If you can see down here, it says the way things were in the 1970s. And as you can see, they were living with their garbage. They were living on the same floor as the same level as the garbage, and very much people who felt that they were rejected by society, even though they were doing such a very important job for society. And these are all pictures I took when I went in 1982 to the garbage village for the first time. So they collected, in those days it was just on donkey carts, and you could see them going through what is now a city of 25 million people. And of course, they would sort it all by hand into different piles, and then they would use it for recycling. They would and basically they thought of themselves as garbage because they didn't know that they had a God who loved them and wanted better for them. But then God used this one man and a couple of his friends to come. And this man, Father Simon, had led his garbage man to the Lord. And then the garbage man spent 2 years begging him to come to his village, which wasn't easy to do in those days. And so Father Simon wasn't real keen to get up there. But finally the Lord kind of told him he had to go. And he went and he started evangelizing in the home of the man that he had led to the Lord. And to his surprise, people responded very quickly to the gospel. This is him and his wife a few years later after they had moved there with their children. And his wife, Suad, had this wonderful gift for discipling. So he did a lot of the evangelism and she did a lot of the discipling. And there was this remarkable response and very fast spiritual growth. First of all, it was a spiritual growth. God changed the people from inside out. He didn't, when Father Simon came, he had no social programs. He didn't have hardly any money. He didn't have any great ideas about what to do. All he knew was that people needed to get saved. And as they got saved, they started changing their situations. They used to be alcoholics and drug addicts, and once they didn't need the alcohol and the drugs anymore, they had some money to build some small homes for their families. And then different things changed in their lifestyles, and really the village itself, the garbage village itself, was changed very fast, outside and inside, definitely within a generation. Their lives centered now around the church. As you can see, this was the only building that was there when I went in 1982. Just as a family that I still know of new believers. And you can see how fast the village changed. They started building up, so they weren't living with their garbage anymore. The kids were getting clean. They started a school. Father Simon and his wife started the first school because the people wanted their children to learn how to read the Bible, even if they couldn't. And this is going ahead years and years, but just to show you in that circle there is the old church, which you can see it's changed a lot. Trucks replaced donkey carts. Well, when Father Simon came to the garbage village, God gave him this promise. And at that time, it sounded really weird. It was, really impossible. It was that God was going to use the garbage people to bless all of Egypt. And he held on to that promise. He didn't know how, but he knew that God was going to do it. And there were many stories in those days of how God used individual garbage collectors to sometimes, in some cases, even lead people to the Lord. But then what happened is that they started discovering that in the hill right above the garbage village and owned by the garbage village, there were caves. And with a lot of help from Christian businessmen who had been blessed by Father Simon and inspired by his work, they started building, the caves, making the caves into churches. So this one, for example, became this. And this church will seat 3,000. There were little churches, there were big churches, there were middle-sized churches, lots of churches up there in the caves. And then this sculptor came along, and he helped to transform the cliffs of the caves into, in a sense, stories, Bible stories, miracles of Jesus, the death of Jesus, the resurrection, the second coming. It's all up there. It's all up there on the cliffs. So even people who can't read can know what's happening, can be evangelized by the cliffs, by the sculptors. And then, of course, people from all over Egypt started coming. Now, see, this garbage village is right in the middle of Cairo. So it was a chance for people to come right in the middle of Cairo and see the garbage village and to see these cave churches. And then it even got known outside. And people would come from outside and say, I want to see the cave churches. So what was happening, see, is that God was fulfilling this promise to Father Simon, but to use the garbage people, the garbage village, to bless lots of Egypt. I mean, Muslim and Christian, many people have been up to those caves and up to those churches, and even to bless people in other countries. This is him after he got old. He actually just died last October. And, 1 year ago. Yeah. And then finally a cathedral was built. And the cathedral can seat about 25,000 people. And this picture down here, like it says, we got it from TripAdvisor as one of the 10 must-see places in Cairo. So, just to end how important this garbage village and these people have become to Egypt. There was a certain time in 2011 when the churches needed to get together and pray. And they needed to pray in a big way. And there was nowhere else to meet except in this church. And so they had a night of prayer. And people from all different churches, different denominations, young and old, spent the night praying. And God answered those prayers. We can tell you more about it if you're ever interested as to how the historical actual thing that happened. But just to show you the large numbers of people who came that night and prayed. As you can see, this evangelism is led by Coptic Orthodox priest. Isn't that wonderful? Now unto him who is able to do immeasurably more than anything we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. To him be glory. Thank you.
shows the importance of being involved in the ministry for over 40 years. But Ramez, you married a remarkable woman, because this isn't the only ministry she's involved in. Rebecca, there are a couple of other ministries, significant ministries, that you fitted into your spare time. Can you briefly comment on the two other main ministries and tell us something about how you become involved with Sudanese orphans in Cairo?
Well, there have been several wars in Sudan in the last many years, and we've had just millions of Sudanese refugees pour into Egypt. And so many years ago, I'm not even sure how many, I started getting involved. Mostly it was through our local church, actually, at first, in ministering to these Sudanese refugees. And we started a program, which is still going on now, of every week, Sudanese come to the church, Muslim and Christian, young and old, men and women, everybody comes. But they come in order to partly to attend the services we have, which of course they don't have to attend them, but fortunately a lot of them do. Spiritual services, some people have come to really know the Lord in a personal way. And they come to receive help, food, used clothing, blankets, counseling. Pardon me? Yeah, we have 550 of them coming out, of families coming, but not every week. Anyway, so out of that, then I also got involved in a Sudanese school, because the Sudanese refugees can't attend the government schools in Egypt, and so they have to have their own school. So over the last 30 years, we've been building up a good Sudanese school, which now has 300 students, kindergarten through high school, and is completely taught and administered by the Sudanese themselves. Then out of that, did you want to hear the last one?
About the orphans that you've been engaged with, Sudanese orphans.
That was the last thing, and it will be the last thing, because I will die still with this ministry, that is for sure, because we discovered that there were 8 orphans living all alone in a school, from like under 3 up to 15, age 15. And that was just a little bit over a year ago. And so a group of us who were already involved with Sudanese refugees started visiting them. And it just was very quickly clear to us what we had to do. You know, it wasn't something that we spent a whole lot of time thinking about or planning. We certainly prayed a lot, that we had to take care of these orphans. So they are living now in an apartment that we rent for them. And 2 Sudanese moms are there taking care of them, one in the daytime, one at night. And they're in schools, and and we provide their food, of course. And we visit them every week, and that's the highlight of my week, is Saturday afternoons visiting my new grandchildren.
Can you just confirm, have you adopted these 8 children?
No, we can't. There's no adoption in Egypt.
Right.
You can't adopt. No. But in effect, we have. I mean, they call us grandma, grandpa. Let me see. Grandma, aunt, and uncle. Yeah. And now they've got some little cousins too, because some of our group has some small children too. Yeah.
How has all this ministry over 40 years changed you from the time that you arrived as quite a young, relatively young married couple, should we say, in Cairo? How has it rebounded in your life in terms of reshaping your own life and mindset?
Yeah. And our children, when we moved to Egypt, our kids were little, 3 and 7. And we were moving from Canada. It's changed all of us very much. I feel that I've learned an enormous amount from working with poor people, and now I work a lot also with disabled and handicapped people up at the Garbage Village. And I feel as though they've taught me so much. You know, their perspective is so different. You know, they don't panic every time something goes wrong, because so much has gone wrong before, and they've learned that God is faithful and they can count on him, and somehow he's going to get them through this, you know. And they don't put this high priority on things and possessions and their identity. Well, it's easier for people who don't own too much to have their identity in the right place, you know, because they're not always thinking about things and stuff and new stuff. And so I've learned that. I have learned, my kids have learned a lot. My kids, I used to take them up to the garbage village because what else would I do with them? I didn't have babysitters. And so they got to know and love a lot of the children up there as they grew up with them. Yeah, it's changed us all.
I have to say, Ramez is more proud of his own wife's ministry than he is of his own, and likes to give more time to Rebecca sharing than he does himself. But he wrote a beautiful thing to me a few weeks ago, because sometimes, historically in the church, there's been tension between a focus on evangelism and engagement with people in society, like in this situation. And Ramez made a beautiful comment in an email to me just a few weeks ago that in the scriptures, we have the Great Commission to take the gospel to the ends of the earth, but we also have the Great Commandment to love our neighbors. And we are called to bring these two things together. So if we emphasize the Great Commission and the Great Commandment, it takes the tension out of the whole debate about engagement in society amongst the poor and so on. Because who can argue with the Great Commandment as well as the Great Commission given to both of us? Ramez, can I just switch to you then for a few moments, because you've been involved in a variety of ministries as well. Two things by way of introduction. Probably you should know that in 1990, we were both interviewed to be General Secretary of IFES. And it was a time when the Bible Society was changing leadership also in Egypt. It was very small and ineffective at the time. And Ramez was being considered as a possible new General Secretary of the Bible Society, as well as possible leader of IFES. And in the interview procedure, I've never heard of this happening anywhere else, he said to the people interviewing us, Lindsay can't speak Arabic, I can. I may be invited to be leader of the Bible Society in Egypt, which could have an impact all across the Middle East. He can only do student work. So I suggest you appoint him to be leader of IFES, and I'll go back to Cairo and lead the Bible Society there. It's a wonderful example of service. But can you tell us what
Let me just correct you a bit.
Yeah. Friends can do this.
I had dreamed of running IFES for about 10 years. I thought I was equipped. I spoke 3 languages, 2 nationalities. I felt this was the ideal next step for me. And then we went, the 3 of us, to 3 people to be interviewed, and Lindsay was the first to be interviewed. When I heard Lindsay answer the questions, I came to the conviction that he would be 1,000 times better than me, because people in third world countries like us are always thinking of receiving. We don't have a burden for what's happening in all the countries of the world. It's not in my DNA. Whereas Lindsay, when he talked, could talk about dozens of countries around the world he's visited, his burden for them, his concern. And I think I was right because after that, IFES grew astronomically the years you held it. So it wasn't just my wanting to do something in Egypt. It was also believing that he was much better. And just a note to the wise, so many organizations, when they have heads of organizations, want to get people of color. I once said, as well as being young and Egyptian, if I was a black woman, I'd be on every committee in the world. So we don't, those of us who get invited to these things have no illusions that we're not the best people, but the color helps. But it really is not a wise idea to appoint someone to head up an international organization who does not have in their heart a world vision. And I didn't. And I realized that in that.
But the Lord did give you a vision for the Bible Society and for its impact, not just in Egypt, but across the Middle East. That's a long time ago now. It's early 1990s. Can you tell us what has happened in the meantime in terms of some of the growth of the Bible Society and some of the exciting developments and elements of ministry that you were involved in leading and initiating?
Like Lindsay said, the Bible Society was very small, Egyptian Bible Society. It didn't have a good reputation. And none of my friends, I worked with IFES for those 10 years, none of my IFES friends thought I should take that job. They thought I was absolutely bonkers. But as we faced obstacles, we tried to turn them into opportunities for the last 30 years. So our challenge was to present God's word in a suitable format, an appropriate price, but much more difficult within the legal, religious, and political restrictions in Egypt. How could we do that in a Muslim country without getting in trouble? The word we used, the motto we used, is when there's a closed door, jump for a window. This is very Middle Eastern. In the Middle East, they tell you you can't do it, and you always find a way to wangle your way around. So that's what kept us going, to look for, not be discouraged by closed doors, but look where is the window we can jump through. So for example, we were restricted in giving out free scriptures. The government told me when they interviewed me, they said, don't give out anything free, you know? So we came up with an ingenious, very creative solution to that problem, which none of you would have thought of. So at the Cairo International Book Fair, we sell a New Testament. It used to be at the time for what's equivalent to 5 US cents. As long as they were paid for it, it's legal. So that was our first lesson. We could evangelize by selling. We didn't have to give out things free. And that's, here people were all sorts of places where you can see us selling the scriptures all over Egypt. But then they said we could only sell from Christian outlets. Very difficult to sell from a secular or Muslim outlet. So we decided to multiply outlets all over the country. So you can see the different bookshops. We now have 19 bookshops in strategic locations across the country. We're the only place in Egypt where Orthodox, Protestants, and Catholics can come in and say, this is ours. You know, we're the official publisher of the Coptic Orthodox Church in Egypt. And the churches there see us as their official publisher. So unintentionally, it created unity within the churches. Because the children, we have 700 products, the children use the same coloring books, the same videos, the same things, whether they're Catholic, Protestant, or Orthodox. So they don't feel there is a difference. And because the Coptic Church is so biblically oriented, we can't keep up with their ministry. We're now distributing 1 million Bibles. We call it Open Bible in every home. We've done about 400,000. There aren't too many places where you can do that kind of thing. Okay, we're not allowed to proselytize. Don't evangelize. Egypt was a socialist country, and we had just moved into an open market. So we looked at what other people did, and we decided we'd do it. Billboards, we'd do billboards. Ads in newspapers, we'd do. Home delivery, we'll do it. It was advertising. And when they tried to stop us, my staff would say, hey, I'm getting a salary to sell, and this helps me. My sales tell me that I cannot sell an officially recognized publication. All our publications have to go through censorship. We have all the paperwork, you know, that needs to be done. So anyway, the opportunities were great. Another challenge we faced, the children are told by their Muslim friends that the Bible has been corrupted. So this was more complicated. This wasn't easy to respond to. So we developed a high-tech, attractive, dynamic experience to help convince them otherwise. We need the sound of that.
Bible World has served thousands of children over the past years through a hands-on Bible experience, helping them better understand just how the Bible came to us, what it is, and why we should trust it, In order to reach all those children who cannot travel all the way from their remote villages to visit the Bible World in Cairo, we long to create a mobile version that would take Bible World to them. That dream has finally come true. The mobile Bible World provides an unforgettable Bible experience as the comical captain leads them in this exciting quest as Bible World sailors, helping children learn more about God's Word. A trip through 5 different tent stations establishes the information as to how the Bible was written, who wrote it, how long it took, how it was accurately copied with simple tools, and how it was translated into many languages. Children learn how the manuscripts verify the text in our hands as the very same book that was written thousands of years ago. And they are reminded that they also have a role to play in
Okay, now the other challenge we had, it was easy to work with children, but very difficult to work with teenagers. They didn't want to listen to us. So we thought of doing a You've Got Talent, where we would get 20 churches and say, we want a talent, singing, acting, something that would reflect a particular biblical theme we would choose for that year. So choose from your people 5 from your church and come to the event and have them compete with others. So we had thousands come. And I've chosen one to share with you that's a little bit different than just a talent. Because we believe that if young people presented this to their friends, they'd listen. This is a 16-year-old girl, Coptic Orthodox girl. She's never met evangelicals. She doesn't know anything about the difference between Orthodox and Protestant or anything. And this is what that was her.
امبارح كلمت ربنا، قعدت معاه وحكيت، قلت له ها يا رب ازيك، وحشتني خالص، عارفة ان دي لي مدة بعيدة، عارفة اني مش بسأل ولا بحكي، عارفة اني بعد الف وادور وبتعب والف وادور واتعب، عارفة اني دايما بتجاهلك واسيبك، بس يا دوبك وانا بحكي، يا دوبك وانا بحكي لقيته بيقول لي بس اسكتي خليكي قاعدة مكانك، انا عايز اشبع من القعدة دي، انا مشتاق ليكي، انا عايز اشبع من القعدة دي. حسيت لحظتها استحقرت نفسي، ازاي انا اهتم بناس مش بيهتموا بيا وناسية اكتر واحد بيهتم بيا، ازاي انا كل يوم صبح ببدأ يومي واقول هملاه بكل حب وناسية اكتر واحد بيحبني. انا رجعت وصليت وقبلت، بس انتوا ايه؟ تفضلوا تشتغلوا تنشغلوا؟ ارجعوا اقعدوا معاه وصلوا، هو هيقبلك زي ما انت، ارجعوا عشان تسمعوا منه كلمة وحشتني.
شكرا لك.
I think that's the youngest 4-year evangelist.
Yeah.
And she was speaking to 2,000 people, so.
I think the key thing to note here is creativity in working. So, for example, when we talk about proclamation, there are many ways to do it creatively. And these are examples of how to creatively engage even in difficult situations. But you must have both faced some immense obstacles or difficulties or challenges. Apart from what you've referred to here, would you like to highlight perhaps one challenge each and how the Lord helped you to deal with it in terms of a lesson for the rest of us? Anything in addition to what you shared here?
Lack of things. I think that to me the most difficult challenge in my life was hiring the right people. And I made a lot of mistakes. We have about 200 staff now, and okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We have about 200 staff, and they didn't all work out. And I learned that character is much more important than competence. Paul says to Timothy, get reliable people who are able to do, but reliable before able. So that was the big lesson I had to learn. And if I only knew it now, I would have not made all the mistakes.
So what else would you say to, there are many younger folks here, some who will be in positions of potentially significant leadership. What lessons have you learned about leadership, which for you are major principles that you would like to pass on to the next generation of potential leaders?
Okay. The most important one is don't follow your gifts, but your calling. Too many gifted leaders want to do everything at the same time. They get exhausted, they get distracted, they get tired. If God has called you for a particular responsibility, and He's put you there, use all the gifts you have for this and other gifts you have put aside for a different season of life. I've just retired from Bible Society. I'm now doing things. I'm doing that seminar with Kenny and Eva. I haven't done an inductive Bible study training for 30 years. Because when I joined the Bible Society, I said, I have to be a publisher. I have to focus on, and I can't go around doing my passion, which is inductive Bible study. So I said, there'll be another season. And now there is another season. So don't do, a businessman once told me, the way to succeed, decide what you're going to do, be the best at it, and don't do anything else. So that's the first advice. The second thing is when you hire people, be sure that their passion is what you're hiring them for. Not their skills, not their CV, not their degrees. Because many people have degrees in all sorts of things, but it's not their passion. And I had very qualified people, and I said, of course they can do this, but it wasn't their passion. The other thing is that when you were going to ask about my style of leadership, I'll put it in here. My style of leadership is when I give someone a responsibility, I give them full authority to implement that responsibility. And by this I mean full authority. Big risk. But it makes the people owners. Many leaders, when they give something to someone, they give the what, but don't give the how. So they get very involved. Come back to me, give reports, do it the way I'll tell you, this kind of thing. And many people don't grow that way. So responsibility with equal authority has been one of the most, and Lindsay is one of the gifted people in this, in empowering people. You empower people when you trust them, and you have disappointments, but the successes are much more than the disappointments.
Now, once you said a very interesting statement. You said the people that you see who are most successful are task-orientated, not gift-orientated.
Exactly.
What do you mean by that?
It's okay.
Because I want to add to this. I think it's really important what Ramez was saying about there are seasons in our lives in which God asks us to do things. And that means that we can't do everything. I mean, somebody said to me, in order to do something, there must be many things you cannot do and you will not do. And this is something I had to learn because oh my gosh, when we moved to Egypt, once I had learned Arabic, there were just so many things I wanted to do and get involved in, you know. But I was raising children. I was trying to help them to get to know the language and the country and everything. So I started at the garbage village, but it was only once a week. And anyway, as they got older, I had more time. Anyway, more and more, God opened up new opportunities as I had more time to do them. And it just dawned on me, actually, just now. One of the things I really wanted to do, all my life I wanted to adopt children. And in my family back in Canada and the States, a number of my sisters and brother have adopted children. I always wanted to adopt children. But actually, Ramez and I made the decision that we would only have 2 children. And that was so that I could kind of continue helping people at the garbage village to raise their children. And then it just dawned on me that in a sense, a little over a year ago, God gave me this opportunity to adopt 8 orphans. Isn't that cool?
In addition to all the other things she does.
Yeah. Have you answered the question about distinction between task orientation and gift orientation, or do you want to add anything more?
Some people think it's their duty to God to exercise all the gifts He's given you. I think that's narcissistic because it fulfills you. It doesn't necessarily accomplish His will. When I took over Bible Society, my primary gifts were not in managing a big organization, raising money, doing this. It was my calling. So whatever gifts I had to expand, stretch. They were not natural to be able to do that. Now, and that relates to that other question we asked about replacing yourself, because my identity wasn't linked to my position. When I left the leadership of Bible Society, I'm delighted. Now I have time to do things like inductive Bible study again. I wasn't tied, my identity wasn't tied to that position, to that responsibility. If you're task-oriented, then you follow the task of a calling God has given you, and you put aside the other gifts. But if you feel you want to fulfill your gifts, you sing, you work, you do, you're just going to go in 6 directions and be exhausted.
It's very interesting, just before Michael Green died, when he phoned Andy and myself the night before he died and said, I want you to speak at the funeral, he gave us the text to speak on at his funeral, and it was, I finished the task which God has given me. And that's the text he picked out for us. The night we were in a mission in St. Andrews the night before he went in for the operation, which he never recovered from. But he picked out the focus on tasks. So I was thinking of your comment in that respect. I have a million questions I'd like to ask you, but I want to encourage folks to queue up to see Ramez and Rebecca while you're here, because they're very special people. Use all the time to engage with them. But before we close, I want to ask 2 other questions, and they are, after now about 55 years of ministry or so, for folks who are just starting off who are younger, are there any other principles or encouragements or lessons you'd like to give to folks who are just starting off that could help shape their approach to whatever ministry God calls them to in the years ahead? You shared some already, but is there anything else you want to say to people moving into leadership or in the early stages of the ministry God has given them?
One of the things I learned when I was very young was that my real success is what happens after I leave a responsibility.
Right.
And if
Great
you don't
point.
think that way, then people make you feel you're indispensable. The worst thing for a leader is to think of himself and other people think he's indispensable. But if, as I said, you give responsibility and authority as much as responsibility, they never have to come back to you. So you are very dispensable. And therefore, you don't find your identity in your indispensability. So when people ask me, my age, you want to retire? I say it's too late. You should have started 40 years ago. To do that, you have to say no to things. You can't be running around speaking and getting very famous and then expecting that you can retire and someone else take your place. So it's a strategy that you have to begin from the very beginning of any ministry you take. This is my 4th, Bible study was my 4th ministry. And in each of them, to a degree or another, I was able to be replaced. But the Bible Society was the best because I had thought of it conceptually. And I knew what I was doing, not just intuitively.
Rebecca.
I think one of the things that I've learned is the importance of prayer. I mean, we've faced a lot of obstacles. We've faced things that seem to be closed doors that absolutely never would open or could open, even though God had made promises about those doors. But you know, it all comes down to prayer. He's the one who's in charge. He's the one that's got to change the situation, make the circumstances right. And all we are to do is to say, here I am, Lord, show me what to do, give me wisdom. It's not my baby, it's not my strength, it's yours. And we do that mostly, I think, through prayer.
I think the other thing I noticed about both of you is you gathered good teams around you. And that's crucial. John Wesley said the Bible knows nothing of solitary religion. If you don't have fellowship, you must make it. Too many evangelists are one-man bands. They have no system of accountability and no people really around them who can challenge them. C.S. Lewis said the great lesson from the book of Daniel is the importance of having believing friends around them. And in the shadow of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There's a Chinese proverb, I don't know if it's true or accurate or not, but it says, if you have, say you have one close friend, you're privileged. If you say you have two close friends, you're very fortunate. If you say you have three close friends, you're unique. If you say you have four, you're probably lying. Because it's so hard to get good workers around them. But you both gathered people around you who were resolute, supportive, and in the ministry with you, so you had people to hand the baton on to in the various ministries in which you were engaged. And I think that's a huge lesson for the rest of us. Those of us who try to lead on our own are just guilty of a mega ego trip. We need to build teams and working them and make ourselves accountable to them. And I want to commend you both for that.
Just so that people don't get too complex by this, I've had to fire 30 people in the Bible Society for every kind of sin you can imagine. And I didn't sleep at night, and I agonized, and part of it is because I didn't put into effect the principles I just shared with you.
Right. Last, is there a last...
By the way, let me tell you about Paul. When he says to Timothy, choose reliable and competent people, a young 17-year-old in an inductive Bible study seminar said Paul said that to Timothy because he failed in doing it. And so it was a manuscript study. Well, in 1 Timothy 1:15, he says, all who are in Asia abandon me. So obviously, he didn't choose the right people. He's telling, but you, Timothy. I looked up all the commentaries on 2 Timothy. None of them said this, that 17-year-old boy discovered an inductive Bible study, manuscript study.
Yeah. Is there any last thing you both want to say? For example, is there anything that we can learn from the church in the majority world? I know you made your comments earlier on about being of a particular ethnicity and so on, and all this kind of prejudice, but the church is growing remarkably, even sensationally in some parts of the world. You've seen it in Egypt, especially in recent decades. What lessons can you see from the Egyptian church, which those of us living in Europe would do well to learn today? Or are there lessons from other believers in the majority world that you've seen that we should take to heart in our context?
I'll say something, and Rebecca probably something. To me, it's the long term. Sticking with it for a long time. People in the Middle East stick for things. They don't take a job and then 6 months later or a few months, years later. While I was head of a Bible Society in Egypt, 30 years, there were 8 presidents of the American Bible Society, and 4 of them had been fired. Very difficult to run an organization when you change your leaders.
Yeah.
In Egypt, people stay in positions, grow, learn from mistakes. So while it's good to do changes, I think both Rebecca and I have learned that sticking to something, we can then see fruit maybe 40 years later that at the time we didn't see. And that we've learned from the people around us. You want to add something?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I'd say the same thing.
Perseverance, which was emphasized last night as well. Well, I think that's about as much as we can do now. Just one last comment on the Bible Society. Historically, IFES movements have had strong links of partnership with the Bible Society. Each morning we're using a gospel portion, as they used to call it, for the Bible, for the evangelistic talks. You know, the first time that the British student movement used gospels on the seats in mission weeks, it was when I was a student in university. And it was because it was a gift of the Bible Society. They gave us 300,000 gospels. So we could use them in mission weeks or event weeks all across the UK. It's not been repeated. But I wish the Bible Society around the world would partner with IFES movements in helping to provide some gospels. It was a wonderful expression of partnership, which set off an approach to evangelistic preaching using the text of Scripture in at least 60 countries around the world. And the people who gave the money never saw it. It's happened since the mid-1970s. It was 1976, the first time. So if you're in a country where there's a Bible Society, go and tell them the story and ask, say, we've benefited from your leaders and your resources. Can we partner again to be effective in reaching students in our generation? Thank you so much, folks. If you can